So, to continue on, one of the things that I did a lot as a child is I spent a lot of time with my grandfather Torta. And that included going to work sometimes with him. Spent time, weeks at a time sometimes in the summertime, visiting. And I got to ride the train one time from Orlando all the way up to, or actually Winter Park, but all the way up to Jacksonville, and got to ride the Greyhound bus a couple of times and had my grandfather pick me up. And whenever Mom and Dad would let that happen, and it always made me feel very adult to be able to travel by myself. And I did lots of stuff with my grandfather. He worked at night, worked for the police department for a long time. Then he worked for the Jacksonville shipyards. And then he went to work for Bacardi Rum. But before I was going to work very much with him, I just did a lot of stuff in the yard with him. And so that meant, he'd mow the grass, I'd pull weeds that he told me to pull, and he never gave me too much to do, but he gave me enough to keep me busy. And helped him do things like trim the fig tree and pick figs, and, don't pick the ones on the ground, pick the ones that are on the tree. And try to beat the birds to them when they were ripe so that my grandmother could can them. And played on the back porch with my sister, playing store, because they stored a lot of canned goods on the back porch. So I would come up to the door, knock on the door, and my sister would open it, and I'd tell her what I wanted, and she'd hand me cans of soup and all kinds of other stuff, and we'd pretend to play, and I had a really good time doing stuff like that. We played in the bushes. The house was surrounded on the sides and the front by giant azaleas, and I'm not kidding, guys. I'm talking azaleas that were 5 or 6 feet tall, and we were just little kids. So we could run around and play in there. And my grandfather's house had 4 or 5 very, very big, very, very old pine trees. So underneath all of these azaleas and other bushes and trees and stuff was nothing but pine needles. So you could play. It was like it had a pine needle floor. There were all kind of bugs in it, but it was just the way it was. We knew about the bugs. The bugs didn't bother us, but we would play, and nobody could tell if we were being quiet. No one could tell you were in there. And when they would, Granny or Grandpa would be looking for us, we could skitter from, they knew we were in there, but we could skitter from one side of the house to the other and never be seen. And Granny especially, would know we were in there and play games with us, and she knew where we were. And but she would go to one side of the house and call for us, and then go to the other side of the house and call for us, and tell us that too bad, you're not going to get to have lunch, and stuff like that. It was always fun. And then down the probably northeast side of their house, I'm not exactly sure on the direction, but I think that's right, there was a stone walkway and some more big hedges that ran down the property line. And Granny had a very extensive garden on the side of the house. And she would do stuff like make these intricate things out of ceramics or all different kinds of stuff, so that they would make a hole that would go down to where the roots of the plant were. So that when you were watering or fertilizing, you were making sure it was going specifically to that plant. And that seems like a lot of work, but it was because she had so many different kinds of plants that had different kinds of requirements. We had what I always called moose horn ferns. I'm not sure if that's really the right name for them, but they are beautiful. And some of the stuff was acidic and other stuff was, different things. So like she would teach us that certain plants, we'd put a couple of spoonfuls of already used coffee grounds, or in other cases it was tea bags, in other cases it was citrus stuff, whatever.
Eggshells. I remember
or eggshells was another good one. Whatever that plant benefited from, and we would crush it up and then put it down in the hole and water the plants or do whatever, or sometimes spread it around the plant and dig up the dirt and mix it in. It just depended. And I don't know for sure, but I would tell you that I bet she had something on the order of 250 different kinds of plants down the side of the house.
Yeah, I would say so.
And also there was a really cool thing that I always thought was cool is they also had the cornerstone from a police station that had been torn down. Mm-hmm. And I always thought that was really cool. And so then that had a winding pathway through it down the side of the house to an area right in front of the garage that had corrugated fiberglass, green corrugated fiberglass cover, and it was like a patio. It was smooth poured concrete, green concrete, and both Grandpa and Granny had lots of plants on these rolling shelves that would hold 3 or 4 different heights of different stuff, and they would actually have a wire shelf with like 4 round things on it that were designed to put terracotta pots into. And so they probably had another, probably another 25 or 30 at least different kinds. Those were more, a shelf, or maybe even the entire shelf would be what the whole thing was. But they were always beautiful, and they were all different kinds of plants. And I know she had some that were succulents that would just thrive off of the air, and just all different kind of things. And it was just always, I thought, cool. And in the shed, in the garage that they never used as a garage, as far as I know, as far as a car or anything, Grandpa had a lot of tools. He had quite a few electric tools, whereas my other grandfather had a way more extensive papa. He had a way more extensive tool collection and used it constantly. And while some of his stuff was electric, he had electric band saws and table saws and stuff like that. He had all kinds of really cool hand tools, all kinds of hand tools, and I'll talk about that a little later. But they also used this garage to grow orchids, and I know that they went to the flower show in Jacksonville many times over the years and won awards. And they used it like a greenhouse. And it had, I don't really understand how hard it is to grow orchids. I just know how much work I saw them do. And that was a dear passion of my grandfather's. And I think Granny too, but I didn't see her work on the orchids near as much as I saw him. And just the most unbelievable colors and stuff. And he would go to the shows and sometimes buy, different kind of orchids from other people and saw stuff that he had. And but he always won. They had a big black board hanging in the hallway that just had all kinds of ribbons on it from all that stuff that they did. And then you went out a little farther and down, well, let me back up. Down the side of the garage was a huge fig tree, and then he had two or three big green posts with wire, heavy gauge wire mounted between the posts. And we grow all kinds of stuff on that. Pole beans, flowers, all different kinds of things. And I always enjoyed that. And around it was coquina rock. And if any of you don't know what coquina rock is, it's a kind of rock that you dig up at the beach in Florida. And it's natural shells that are, over the years, have stuck together. And so the stones were all different shapes and sizes, but they would make all kinds of cool boundaries for the little flower beds that way. And if you walk right down the center of his yard from the back door to the back, he also had a gigantic fire pit that he had built himself. And my understanding is he ruined a car doing this by going back, and some of it I guess is a little bit hearsay, but I could certainly believe this, is that he would go to the beach and get this stone because it was free. He would dig it up and weigh the car down with it and drive it back from St. Augustine or drive it back from Jacksonville Beach. And he built this really cool working fire pit that I can remember him using. As the years went by, a lot of it rusted and he couldn't find the parts. And so it kind of got into disrepair, but I can remember early on it get used a lot. So then after you did that, you'd go to the back of the garage, and there was a single, Grandpa drove and Granny did not drive. She didn't have a driver's license and she didn't want to drive. So he took her everywhere she wanted to go. And on the other side of the garage was another fig tree, and he owned a little sliver of land that was about the length of a car. It's about the same size as his carport, that went from his carport all the way down to the end of the street. And so part of it was grass, and like I said, part of it was a fig tree. But then he had probably 6 feet wide, maybe a little bit wider, and he had built a fence all the way around it. He had a garden, and in that garden we would work pretty frequently, and he grew all kinds of stuff. And he would go to the chicken farm and he would get chicken manure, and he would use the chicken manure as fertilizer. He'd put it on his grass, he'd put it on the stuff in the garden, and when he put it in the yard, the neighbors, I'm sure, were thrilled because it stunk to high heaven, and little pin feathers would go everywhere. And but working in the garden, he grew collard greens, he grew pole beans, all kinds of tomatoes, like 5 or 6 different kinds of tomatoes. He grew all different kinds of peppers. He grew, traditional bell peppers, and just all kinds of stuff. And that's where I kind of got my ability to grow plants from, was from them, just picking it up and watching what they were doing and learning. And I can remember getting told to go get go cut the it's not turnip greens, the what's the other kind of green, Neil?
Collards?
Yeah,
Mustard?
go cut the collards. And that meant go get a big old huge black trash bag, like a 50-gallon trash bag, and a steak knife, and go out and trim off all the lower levels of all of the bushes. And I'd fill that entire bag up every few days, and then he would then cook some of them for us, and for themselves, and then share it with everybody he knew. And he would grow, I'd say, about a quarter of his garden, so probably 20 foot by 6 foot was nothing but those greens. And he would always share them with everybody, and we would grow them, and they would get far taller than me and just constantly producing new leaves. And we would probably get a trash bag of greens out of there probably every 2 weeks for the entire growing season. And all the different members of the family had different ways that they liked to prepare them. But one of the favorites was to put pepper vinegar on it, and it was pretty awesome. So those are some of the memories of Grandpa's house and growing up there.